Blah, 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 blah. Check, check, check. One, two, three. Hello. Up. Can normally see. Yeah. Check, check, check.
Check, check, check.
Check, check, check. Denise.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for being here, for coming, dear colleagues, dear guests. Director of the Center for Civil Liberties 2022 Nobel Peace Prize laureato, Alexandra Matvichuk, our honorable President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola. It's really an honor to have you here. Special Reporter of Immunity of State Officials and former President Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, Claudio Grossman, and the Colombia former High Commissioner for Peace, our good friend Sergio Jaramillo. It's really a pleasure to welcome you all to this event, Standing Up for International Law and Human Rights, Latin America, Europe, and the invasion of Ukraine, organized with the Latin American Solidarity Campaign, Aguanta Ucrania, since Russia's illegal, unjustified, and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The Ukrainian people have shown the world the most extraordinary act of bravery, resilience, and strength of our time, and unwavering commitment to the principles of freedom, democracy, and international law, values which are also at the core of the European Union and the many other nations in the world. Following this spirit of resilience and hope, the Aguanta Ucrania campaign, initiated by Latin American intellectuals, artists, and politicians, has been raising awareness and support for Ukraine in Latin America. The founders of the campaign, Mr. Jaramillo and the author Héctor Abad Faciolince and the journalist Catalina Gomez, were in Ukraine in June of 2023, 2 years ago, accompanied by acclaimed writer and war crimes documentalist Victoria Amelina. On June 27th, they were sitting in a restaurant in Kramatorsk when they were attacked by a Russian ballistic missile that severely injured Victoria Amelina, who tragically passed away a few days later on July 1st. We have here in the European Parliament a space with this name, the name of Victoria Amelina, in Strasbourg. Since her murder, the movement has kept her legacy alive by demanding that her death and other war crimes do not go unpunished. Today, we will continue the discussion started by Victoria Amelina and Aguanta Ucrania, and the key role that Europe, Latin America, and Ukraine must play in the defense of international law, peace, and human rights in the current geopolitical context, as well as holding in a memorial moment to honor her memory and legacy. To start the discussion, we are really honored to count with the presence and participation of the Honorable President of the European Parliament, and Roberta Metsola, whose bravery as one of the first world leaders to visit Ukraine right after the invasion led the way, sparked a movement of support and solidarity, especially here in Europe, and inspired many others to do the same. Their president, Roberta, querida Roberta, thank you for being with us today in this special event, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, dear Vice President Lopez, dear Javi, dear Director Matvichuk, dear Alexandra, Professor Grossman, former High Commissioner Jaramillo, distinguished guests, and dear colleagues. Welcome to the European Parliament. As I had the opportunity to say in a few words on my way in, I'm glad to see friends from both sides of the Atlantic here today. Thank you, dear Javi, for bringing us together, and to Aguanta Ucrania for making this today happen. The powerful message from Latin America is so important in terms of solidarity. Their voices join ours in the European Parliament as we speak out in support of Ukraine and democracy everywhere. Dear Alexandra, as you said in our Parliament when you received the European Order of Merit last month, Ukraine is paying the highest price for standing up for our common values. You are fighting not just for your lives and your independence, but for the freedom and the values that sustain all our democratic societies. This is not only about working for a just and sustainable peace. And thanks to all the colleagues who are here, including also Ukraine's ambassador, Mr. Chensov. This is not only about working for peace, it is about respect, what is fundamental for common values and protection of rights. It is the same open and democratic approach that we took when we built our union from the ashes of the devastating war over 80 years ago, and that continues to power our parliament today. It is our roadmap for peaceful, safer, and more stable societies that deliver for the people that they serve. Let me outline 3 actions that we believe we must take to strengthen that approach together. First, we need to keep up the approach and the pressure on Russia and support for Ukraine, including for merit-based accession. This House has consistently proven itself an ally in this mission, from adopting funding packages in record time to amplifying Ukraine's voice at every opportunity. And together we are making progress on enlargement with the recent opening of Ukraine's first negotiation chapters. Second, we must push back against the normalization of a more violent unilateral approach to global affairs that seeks only to destroy and not to build. That means working on the momentum that Aguanta Ukraine has already gained, mobilizing public support, speaking up for democracy and combating disinformation, because in the words, and thanks for spending so much of your opening remarks on Victoria Melina, in the words of her as a Ukrainian writer in whose memory we meet today and whose name is immortalized in our building in Strasbourg, the response to truth is often more truth. And that is why regimes fear even small bits of it. Third, we need to keep strengthening the democratic dialogue between our regions. That is how we reinforce the multilateral order that we rely on and protect our common values. And that means, yes, growing our cooperation via the Euro-Latin American Parliamentary Assembly, where, dear Harvey, you represented our parliament earlier this year as vice president. It also means building on the success of our EU CELAC summits. We attended the 2023 edition together on behalf of this parliament, where the focus of our discussions was on how we can better work together towards global peace and stability. So your presence today, all of you, your solidarity with the people of Ukraine proves that as friends and allies, our democratic approach is stronger than ever before. Together, we will help Ukraine reach a just and lasting peace based on the principle that we've stuck with from day one of nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. So I know everyone is looking forward to the discussion ahead. So I'll stop here and hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I will do a brief introduction to our speakers and our theme today, but I do want first to thank you, President Metsola, for being here. We're really very, very honored to count with your presence, and I want to thank especially our dear Vice President Javi Lopez, without whom none of this would be happening. Our speakers who traveled a long way to be here, Oleksandr Matvichuk, from Ukraine, and Claudio Grossman, who is now based in the US. I want to thank also CMI, who provided us essential support. Thank also the Embassy of Ukraine, our dear ambassador somewhere here, for the help, and all our friends in our campaign of Latin American solidarity, Aguanta Ucrania. Dear friends, you don't need to be told by me that we live in a changing world, a more dangerous and more fragile world. Many claim that, in my view, too quickly, perhaps a little bit too glibly, that the world order has collapsed and that only military might counts. My point today is not to argue against that view, but to say rather that we live in a world in transition. and that there are many other sources of influence. And we live in a world where we have to make a choice to shape or to be shaped. And in that world, the defense of international law is not just a matter of legal obligation or of solidarity, it's also a matter of self-interest. And in order to shape, we need to have allies, we need to have alliances built around shared values. And that's what we're here today, because in our view, there is no region of the world where international law is as much part of the DNA as Latin America. As former President Sanguinetti of Ukraine said in a video he did for our campaign Aguanta Ucrania, which if you're patient enough, you will see at the end of this session, he said, for us who were born out of an international treaty, international law is our life. That is why when we see Ukraine fight, we know it is our own cause, the cause of international law, the cause of true peace and liberty. This is the former president of Uruguay. And as our dear Claudio Grossman said in another video for our campaign, with exactly the same logic, Ukraine may seem very far away from Latin America, but in fact, it's very close, precisely for those reasons. And what we're seeing now, what we're seeing today, what we saw yesterday, is a country, Russia, trampling every day on international law, not just by invading its neighbor, invading Ukraine, but by killing civilians with intent all over its territory. I encourage all of you to read the reports of the Office of the High Commission of Human Rights and of the Special Commission of Inquiry. In the report for last year, for example, the Office of the High Commissioner says that almost 40% of the civilian deaths in Ukraine happened far away from the front and were the result of missiles and drones. They document things like, for example, the use of first-person view drones in cities like Kherson, attacking civilians, attacking buses. These are not mistakes. This is not military necessity. This is targeted killing of civilians with intent, with the use of drones. Think about it, every oblast in Ukraine has had civilians killed, and you don't have the front all over Ukraine. Last month, the month of May, again, according to the UN, was the month with the highest number of civilian casualties since April of 22. So this is going up, not down. Just yesterday, 15 people were killed in Ukraine, 6 with a missile in Dnipro. I mean, this is really barbaric behavior. And if you look at the total number of civilians killed in Ukraine by now, it's actually very close to the number of civilians killed in Gaza, where we have witnessed the commission of some very, very horrific crimes. But there is a difference. There is a difference. And that is that in the case of Ukraine, it is a permanent member of the Security Council that is committing these crimes. A permanent member of the Security Council has the duty to safeguard the peace and security of the world, has the duty by the Charter to abide by the principles of the UN. That is why in September of 2024, with a group of over 30 renowned human rights defenders from Latin America and Ukraine, including Alexandra, including Claudio, and with over 20 former foreign ministers of Latin America, we drafted and sent a letter to the Secretary General of the UN, asking him to suggest to the President of the Assembly that he suspend Russia from the Assembly as South Africa was suspended in the 1970s, because this behavior is completely incompatible with the obligations of Russia under the Charter and the trust that the community of nations has put in the permanent members. We said also that if this continued, It was threatening to turn the entire edifice of IHL into an empty shell with consequences far beyond Ukraine, which we are indeed seeing all over the world. Dear friends, it is high time to join forces and push back more loudly against this abhorrent behavior, and to join forces and stand up, as President Metsola said, for international law and human rights. And to talk about that, we have two exceptional speakers today. Alexandra Matvichuk to my left, if Alexandra allows, really one of the most exceptional people I have ever met, with a long, I don't want to use the word career because career gives a wrong impression, really a vocation of defense of human rights, at least since the Maidan in 2014, now leads the Center for Civil Liberties in Ukraine, and as you all know, was awarded the Nobel Prize for Peace in 2022. And Claudio Grossman, one of the most distinguished international law and human rights experts, not just in Latin America, but in the world. Claudio was, amongst many other things, the president of the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights. He was the president of the UN Committee Against Torture. And just now, he's finishing his job as special rapporteur, as part of the Commission of International Law of the UN, as special rapporteur on the articles of immunity of state officials, which could not be more pertinent to this discussion because that includes all of the discussion of the exclusion of international crimes. As Javi mentioned, 3 years ago, this Saturday actually, we suffered this unbelievable attack in Ukraine. And as you can perhaps imagine, it is one thing to intellectually think about these things, it's another thing to be sitting there, as I was sitting myself next to Victoria. So, who was really, we can't begin to talk about Victoria, a very dear friend of Alexandra. For the time I knew her, I can only say she was a most exceptional person, and it's a very great loss to Ukraine. She gave voice to what really was happening there and to the brutality of the Russians against civilians. So I will ask you, if I may, for 1 minute, that we stand for 1 minute of silence for Victoria. And I would also like to ask you to think of the hundreds, perhaps thousands of Venezuelans who have just died the last few days, and some of whom may be at the moment trying to survive under the rubble. Thank you very much. So we'll begin with Alexandra, then we'll listen to Claudio, then we'll have a little discussion amongst ourselves. We may have time for 1 or 2 questions from the public, and we'll close with a little video of Latin American voices on Ukraine. Alexandra, please.
Thank you very much for providing me a floor. I'm very grateful for European Parliament and Uganda-Ukraine for organizing this important event and to dedicate it to the memory of my dearest friend, Ukrainian writer Victoria Melina. Latin America and Ukraine are far from each other from the geographic point of view, but we are very close when we speak about values. Latin America and Europe must defend international law and human rights, especially when they are under attack for current moment. As a human rights lawyer, I'm applying the law to defend people and human dignity for many years, but now I found myself in situation when the law doesn't work. The world order that based on UN Charter and international law has collapsed. This system was created after the Second World War to prevent wars and mass violence, but now it's just stalling and reproducing ritualistic movements. Unfortunately, it's easy to predict that fires like wars can emerge more and more often in different parts of the globe because this international wiring is faulty and sparks are everywhere. And as a human rights lawyer, I think that one of the main questions today is the following: how we people who live in 21st century will defend human beings, their lives, their freedom, and their human dignity? Can we rely on the law, or does just brutal force matter? And the answer to this question is important not just for people in Ukraine, in Sudan, in Somalia, in Venezuela, or Nicaragua. The answer to this question will define our common future. This Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, it's a bright attempt to rewrite the world order. Because with this war, Putin attempts to convince the entire world that human rights, freedom, rule of law, democracy are fake values because they couldn't protect anyone during the war. Putin attempts to convince that country with a strong military potential and nuclear weapon can do whatever it wants, can invade in other countries, kill people there, erode their identity, steal their children, occupy their territories, and forcibly re-educate them as Russians. So if Putin succeeds and will remain unpunished, it will encourage others, authoritarian leaders in different parts of the globe to do the same. It's extremely important, especially for the Europe, because Putin has launched large-scale war not just to occupy one more part of Ukrainian land. It's naive to think that he lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers just to occupy Avdiivka or Bakhmut. He's not mad. He started large-scale war because he wants to occupy the whole country and move further. He sees Ukraine as a bridge to Europe, and his logic is historical. He dreams about his legacy. And that is why people in other European countries, they are safe only because Ukrainians are still resisting and don't let Russian army to move further. So the question is how to stop this bloody war. Because I work with people affected by this war directly. So let me assure you that people in Ukraine dream about peace. They dream about peace, but simply don't want to be occupied by Russia. Because occupation is the same war, just in another form. Occupation is not just changing one state flag to another. Occupation means enforced disappearances, torture, rape, denial of your identity, forcible adoption of your own children, filtration camps, and mass graves. This is Russian occupation. And that is why let's analyze the peace negotiation that was initiated by President Donald Trump last year. Probably you have heard already that the first years of Trump negotiation became the deadliest year for Ukrainian civilians. According to UN, the numbers of civilians who were killed and injured increased in 31% in comparison with the previous year. And when we speak about first 4 months of this year, according to UN, the numbers of deaths and injuries among civilians increased in 21%. So we see that the level of deaths is increasing, and it's not something that you expected from the peace process. It's a clear indicator that something is going wrong. And what the wrong? We lost human dimension in peace process. American negotiators discussed natural minerals, Russia's territorial claims, geopolitical interests, but they don't speak about people, and it's not okay. We still have no idea what will be with dozens of thousands Ukrainian children separated with their families and illegally deported to Russia. We still have no idea what will be of dozens of thousands of Ukrainian civilians, as well as prisoners of the war, who in that moment are dying in Russian prison because of torture, sexual violence, and lack of medical care. When American negotiators discussed the question of occupied territories, I have a strong impression that they see it like empty spaces. But I'm sorry, these spaces are not empty. Millions of people live there without any tool how to defend their rights, their freedom, their property, their life, their children, and their beloved ones. So I think we must return human dimension into all political process in international arena when we speak about Russian war of aggression against Ukraine. Without human dimension, we would never find a path to sustainable peace. And the question is how to stop this bloody war. I don't think that it's about agreement. Let me remind you that in 2014, when Russia invaded Ukraine and occupied Crimea and part of the eastern regions, Ukraine has a zero chance to release its territories, and Ukraine signed 2 peace agreements with Russia, and Russia violated them both and started large-scale war. So it's not a question how to sign the third one that Russia would violate tomorrow. The question is how to reach sustainable and just peace. This is a question. And the answer is not simple because there is no magic button, but the answer is in the logic. And the logic is to make the price for war for Putin higher than the price for peace. And it's not about philosophical discussion, it's about complex of decisive actions. Because war is still profitable. War, centralized power of Putin provides excuse for all internal problems, and war become profitable for people in Russia. Majority of them live in depressive regions in unbelievable poverty, and for them to join Russian army, it's the only way how to make a social lift and how to start to receive money that they can't even dream in their depressive region. And that is why our Russian human rights colleagues call this type of economy necronomy. We must break this necronomy and their ability to feed this bloody war. And this is about concrete actions. This is about confiscation of Russian frozen assets. This is about arrest Russian shadow fleet, which is not shadow, frankly speaking. Intelligence can identify these ships without high problem. This is about creation of special tribunal and aggression. This is about the closing the back door that Russia used to bypass the sanctions and all other steps that is needed to be done in order to make price for war for Putin higher than the price for peace. And the question is not that European Union and countries of European Union don't know what has to be done. The question is whether or not their leadership would have courage and historical responsibility to make all these decisive actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandra, for those very wise and moving words. Claudio, give us the view from Latin America, please.
Thank you, Jorge. First of all, I am honored to be in the company of Alexandra and act in the European Parliament and to count with the presence of all of you here. I want also to thank Sergio Jaramillo. We wouldn't be here if he would not have been a source of inspiration and organization of these events. The war against Ukraine is not only a war against Ukraine, it's a war against norms concerning the use of force in international relations. It's a war against democracy and human rights, including the right of self-determination, which is the first right on the international covenants on civil and political rights and economic, social, and cultural rights. It promotes extreme ideologies, showing the interconnection between international law and human rights. It's a war against international law. It's a war against all of us. It's also a call for action. It's a war against the use of force. The invasion, the aggression violates the prohibition of the use or threat of the use of force established in Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the United Nations Charter, as well its authorized exception, including action by Security Council, hindered in this case by Russian veto, and another exception, the inherent right of self-defense if a collective or individual, if an armed attack occurs. Russia has invoked different reasons for the invasion, none grounded really in international law. The most extreme, to use a Latin American term, hints of magical realism, postulated that this was a peace operation, or let me say, a special operation, terms not used by the Charter of the United Nations. However, the substitution of terms does not allow allow for the evasion of legal norms. Equally implausible and laughable are the accusation of genocide, Nazism, or the invocation of historical and security reasons on the part of Russia. The real motives emerges from the publications and speeches by Putin. For example, in his essay, Russia at the End of the Millennium of 1999, the book First Person of 2000, the essay on the historical unity of Russians and Ukrainians, and different presentations that he had made show the real motives. For Putin, modern Ukraine is an artificial state created by the Soviet regime. He argues that Ukraine and Russia are one people united by language, tradition, and religion. Russian weakness in accepting the creation of Ukraine is, in accordance with Putin, an unfortunate example of paralysis in the exercise of power. This evidentiary material demonstrates a sadist vision of history with fascist ideological components, such as the aspiration of unification with Russia based on the identity of the Slavic peoples and their traditions, origin, and religion, which recalls the typical unifying motto of identity of blood and soil, of Nazism, and currently of white supremacist groups in different countries. The concept of paralysis in the use of power really shows something very important. It is against the Article 2, Paragraph 10 of the Charter of the United Nations. It's Article 1, Paragraph 2 on the right of self-determination, essential for friendly relations among nations, and articles that have been supported and approved by both Europe and Latin America, essential. When the Charter of the United Nations was approved, the General Assembly and the Third World was composed before the process of decolonization by Latin America. And all these norms counted with the support of Latin America. Important is to mention also the interconnectedness with this rejection of this basic norm, and that's why this is not only a war against Ukraine, is the fact that this type of approach to law has promoted reactionary ideological approaches in different countries that have embraced Putin's cause, seeing in the Russian leader an example to follow, including the generation of leaderships by strong men who perpetuate themselves in leading the nation and in the exercise of strength without any limit. They are united by the message of rejection of a multilateral order in addition to adhering in some cases to chauvinist visions and rejecting the change in values of issues of discrimination of any kind. In the case of Latin America, already since its foundation, authors like Bello, Drago, Calvo, Alvarez presented very strongly the value of self-determination in order to justify under international law the existence of the Latin American nations and the right to choose their own destiny. There is a strong connection also to human rights and democracy. The chauvinist conception of superiority based on power is contrary to the prohibition of discrimination in human rights norms, another creation of humanity that rises from the ashes of the Second World War against the adoption of the Human Rights Declaration by the General Assembly of the United Nations was possible with the votes of Latin America and Europe. This declaration was essential. It shows the inherent dignity and humanity of all and applied to every human being without discrimination. This is extraordinary. You look every article of the Universal Declaration and say every person, everyone, all individuals are entitled to different rights. No one may be subjected to summary executions, disappearances, or excluded from exercising their civil and political rights or international recognized economic, social, and cultural rights. Also, they establish the principle that protects the collectives, the nations. And this is also essential in what was the participation on Latin America and continue to be one of the European countries. The principle of self-determination is explicitly recognized in the Charter of the United Nations, as I mentioned before. These principles are not just aspiration disconnected from reality, as revealed in the reaction against aggression by Ukraine and its efforts. They also show their validity, for example, in Latin America, in the fact that in the worst moment of Latin American history, alternative visions of democracy as the legitimate way to govern the Latin American Republic have been not able to capture in a sustained way the legitimacy of power. We have known the strong men, we have known ideologies that purports leadership by military or ideologies, but they have not been able to capture the legitimacy of democracy. Again, this is not grounded simply in the paper. The paper has patience, but it has been grounded in real aspirations that are reflected in this conquest of human rights that are expressed in the United Nations charters, in customary law, and different treaties. Let me finish my remarks to say the following. This is not only a question of complaining or expressing what's wrong with the invasion. This is a call for action and solidarity. This is a call for all of us to react against this aggression. Literature shows with imagination hidden aspects of reality as is expressed in literature. It's interesting that Kafka wrote about George Samsa becoming an insect. And in Europe, human beings became insects and were crushed and destroyed. Literature anticipated that. In the case of Latin America, Gabriel Garcia Marquez put it in the same direction and in the direction of imagination. In the change of the century, when asked, what can we expect for the 21st century? He said, the passage of time doesn't change things. Some of the most important things that have happened rested on imagination and action, like the Ninth Symphony or the heart transplants, without action and imagination and solidarity, we are not going to be able to sustain the important principles in which the world order is based. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Claudio. And we particularly appreciate that call to action, to concrete actions. And with that, we'll move to Javi Lopez, Vice President of the European Parliament. Javi was also for a long time the head of the Latin America group at the Parliament, as all of you know, and has been a friend of Ukraine and a friend of our campaign. We did an event here 3 years ago, also in memory of Victoria Melina. What do you make of all of this, Javi, and how do you think we can deploy the solidarity of Europe and Latin America vis-a-vis Ukraine and international law in general?
Thank you very much. It's really an honor to chair this table after these inspiring words made by our guests. No, I have 3 or 4 ideas to share with you. Well, first of all, we share, and the comments made today were online with this. We shared that it's not a conflict or a war, or not even some rules of the international law that are on a stick and are attacked in Ukraine. It's more than that. In my view, what we are designing in Ukraine is first the basis of the peaceful coexistence in Europe after 1945. Basically, after the Second World War, it was mentioned by our president, Metsola, we organized coexistence, peaceful coexistence in Europe based on 2 ideas. First, we will not paint again borders by the force. Second, when we will have disputes, we will sit at a table and we will discuss, but we will not use the force again to solve disputes. Under these 2 ideas, basically we organize all of this. The European integration, the EU, and make possible 80 years of peaceful coexistence. And this is what is being attacked in Ukraine. The basic values that made possible peace in Europe during the second half of the 20th century. But not only that, what also is on a stick in Ukraine are the basis of the human dignity and the freedom of our countries. The ideas of Europe, that were based on first, that, well, the idea of not dominance, that it was mentioned, that all we are owners of our destiny, and collectively we are owners as a nations of our destiny. Under this idea, we built after democracy, fundamental rights, multilateralism, international law. Under this idea, and it is what is attacking Russia on Ukraine, that all of us, we are owners of our destiny. This is like, for this reason, it's so important what is happening in Ukraine for the international world order and for Europe. Second, when we discuss about this, and this is something that I want to underline, like Europe overlooked Latin America as partners on the defense of the international law and multilateralism. It's a region that is completely committed to the international law. They were able to bring some of the architectures of the international law. They are owners of the chapter of United Nations, I will say, the region. And when you see the votes of the Assembly, of the General Assembly, also we see a consistent support of the region to the fundamental principles on international law regarding Ukraine. Probably it's more modest, if you want, when you talk about sanctions, military aid, material solidarity, true, and we can discuss why this happens, with Latin America. Then when you see the votes on United Nations, and this count because it's the position and the opinion of Latin America on the conflict, it's the region who is showing most consistent support on the international law. The point here is how we use better this potential cooperation and collaboration between both regions on the support of Ukraine, but not only that, on the support of the need of rebuilding into a rules-based order. My third question, well, I'm very proud of what Europe is doing on supporting Ukraine. Always could be more, could be better, but I'm proud of the effort that we are doing. I see Ukraine as one of the most extraordinary acts of heroism now in our times, collective and individual heroism. But at the same time, being honest, for Europe, the homework to do on this regard is more consistency, not only with Ukraine, with the rest of the world. Because this is something that also our Latin American friends also underline, and also with arguments on that. Consistency, it's key also for the support of Ukraine. And here we have room to improve, to be honest. If we see the rest of the world where we are more divided, we are more weakened, where we are not enough explicit of when the international law is broken and it's violated. And my fourth point, and with this I will want to end, like the discussion ends on Ukraine, what happens when it's the powerful who broken the rules? How we defend the rules. And this is the case, no? One member permanent member of the Security Council of United Nations. And I think it was explicitly underlined, no? And the path it has been shown is the rest, we have to ensure that the price for breaking the rules is higher than the benefits. Because it's the only way to be able to reinforce the rules that are the basis of a peaceful coexistence in the world. And this is what we have to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Javier. And I want to pick on on this idea of a call to action and to think what kind of things can be done. And if I may mention again, this idea of shaping, but not just shaping top down by having nations come together and sign a charter, but shaping bottom up by creating stronger alliances, not just amongst governments, but amongst civil society and even parliaments. So before we finish, we want to give you the chance to ask perhaps two questions to our speakers. But I want to take the liberty first to ask, we have a very distinguished retired Brazilian diplomat amongst us, Norton de Andrade Melo Rapesta, who, believe it or not, was lying on his bed on the 24th of February 2022 in Kyiv as ambassador of Brazil to Ukraine when he started hearing the planes flying and the bombs falling. And Norton is a very, very sharp observer and analyst. And so, Norton, what can you tell us 2 words about what you saw and what you think we should do?
Good morning. First of all, congratulations for this event. Thank you for having me here. The difference between watching a movie about a war and being into one without knowing it, it's a huge difference. Since the first explosions in the 24th of February, 2022, which I, as Sergio said, I witnessed it from the balcony of my apartment in Velika Zhytomyr 20 in Kyiv. I've discovered a country of resilience, a country of democratic and human rights values, a country of solidarity, a country of people that are ready to talk, to hug, to welcome you. Past more than 4 years, all the discussions, even with Latin America, all the support that have been done, the solidarity that is said, I think we have to start thinking outside the box somehow, because the traditional diplomacy failed. We diplomats, we failed to avoid the war. And we have been failing to stop the war. So someone spoke about money, about investments, and why not to pick up some of the money that the assets the Russians have here in Brussels and use them, not to buy solidarity, not to buy armaments, but to invest into what they heard more in Ukraine, which is the electricity and the heating system facilities, the production of electricity and heating. And if they bomb them again, they lose the money. If they don't bomb them again, well, we pay you back. We pay them back. So if it hurts on the pockets, let's touch the pockets, because the solidarity is beautiful, but it doesn't stop the killing. Now I'm with some friends I live in Spain, Mr. Lopez. I live in Barcelona, and together with some Ukrainian friends and Spanish friends, we are collecting nets, fishing nets, and we have already collected well, a huge quantity. I don't know the weight, but we are, with the help of NGOs, we are sending to Ukraine to save lives, to avoid the drones to hit people walking on the streets, civilians, as was mentioned here, that the quantity of civilians killed has raised a lot. These are practical solidarity acts, and as well as for Latin America, especially when I speak about Brazil, that we are solidary. Brazilians are solidary, but we could do more. The European Parliament, I think, could do more with enhancing the contacts with the parliaments in Brazil. Not only the federal parliament, but the local regional parliaments, as we have in Spain as well. I have a almost double nationality. I'm Spanish as well. And so to enhance this dialogue, to touch hearts and minds, because when it stays into the cabinets, in the official buildings, it's very thin, it's very distant. It's not the reality that we face in Ukraine, where I have had the opportunity to go back there twice, and I'll go the third time very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Norton. This was what you just heard. These are Catalan fishermen who give away their old nets so they can protect civilians from drones in eastern Ukraine. So we're going to try and do one or two questions, and then watch our video, and we're done. Please.
Sergei Kasyanov, Professional Government Association of Ukraine. Thank you, Sergio, for mentioning a petition to ban Russia to access to the UN General Assembly. I have a question. How feasible would be move to take a Russian seat at the permanent seat at the Security Council of the United Nations for its crime against humanity and multiple aggressive war with its neighbors. Thank you.
If I may, I will. So we actually studied all of this quite closely when we were drafting our text, because technically, as a founding member, Security Council member of the Charter, well, there's nothing you can do about that with Russia. But technically, you can suspend it from the Assembly as a procedural matter. As was done with South Africa, there was a consensus that it was intolerable to have apartheid South Africa in the Assembly in the 70s, and it was suspended. And it was causing enormous harm to its own population, but it wasn't killing civilians in the neighboring country intentionally as Russia is doing. But perhaps I will take opportunity of that question to ask Claudio Grossman what other opportunities he sees under international law to take more measures, because I personally find it scandalous that people are not more scandalized by this behavior of Russia.
Let me start saying that solidarity, words matter. I recall when I was the president of the Inter-American Commission and visited the person in jail in very awful conditions. And he said to me, I don't know whether you could stop the situation in which I am now, but your sheer presence here empowers me and demoralizes my opponents. That is not a way to justify only solidarity, but solidarity matters. It is important that Russia was excluded as an observer on the Organization of American States, for example. And that has an impact on the relationships with Latin America. I agree with the Vice President that Latin America is reluctant to add to political measures of solidarity, sanctions, for example. But the analysis of international law showed the emergences of new actors, individuals, churches, organizations. And there is a tremendous space for positive action of solidarity. We heard this one of the nets to protect Ukraine. There are possibilities of coordinating, for example, actions by universities to express solidarity, admit Ukrainian students and invite Ukrainian students and professors. There are some of the top universities of the world, some of the top councils in America. Churches from all persuasions can play a role. I record the experience in Chile in that matter. So activities could happen at the level of civil society, and there is a moment where that could have an impact in the actions of government. The analytical way to analyze states and government is not that they are one rational actor. There are multiple factors there, and to start a process where we can go to more concrete actions requires mobilization and actions by civil society. And certainly in connection with Europe, that would be strengthened. Also, as the war against Ukraine is not only a war against Ukraine, and it's also a war against Europe and Latin America, we have to consider also the role of other actors. There are tremendous moral resources, for example, in the hemisphere, in the United States and Canada, at the level of civil society. And if we coordinate efforts, we should not restrict these efforts only seen from the point of view of states, and we can mobilize positively civil society. That's my answer, and thank you for what you have expressed.
On that question, may I ask you as well, Alexandra, because you are the director of a very distinguished center, the Center for Civil Liberties, and you travel the world. Ukraine has some excellent diplomats, like Ambassador Chensov was here, but if Ambassador allows, I think the most important thing that Ukraine has are voices like Alexandra's, voices like Victoria's that are telling the world what's really going on, How can we strengthen these bonds of solidarity amongst civil society organizations, Alexandra?
Not easy question to answer because Russia invested probably billions of euros to build a powerful informational infrastructure across the globe. And when I came to countries of Africa, countries of Latin America, countries of Asia, and met people there, I understood that we start not from the 0 point that we know nothing about this region, they know nothing about Ukraine. It seems that they know something, but everything that they know was told them by Russia. So they still look to other parts of the globe through the Russian prism. And this is probably the main problem and obstacle that we can't get result that we want in General Assembly, for example. Because returning to General Assembly, even before President Trump took his office and position of United States was changed, I never remember in any annual resolution of General Assembly that devoted to a large-scale invasion to Ukraine that they voted every February, any words about special tribunal on aggression. Because when you put the real mechanism of justice to the text of resolution, which has just explained the position, it's not the call to action, you will not have more than 100 votes that we got to collect in previous iteration. So this is a problem. And I think that the only way how to solve this problem is to strengthen horizontal ties between people in Ukrainian society and other societies, that we have to build bridges between artists, between religious leaders, between professional workers and other communities to overcome the lie that Russia widespread through the world.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. And with that, we're going to watch a little video. We don't have simultaneous translation, so you'll have to look very closely because perhaps Javi and Claudio, if you want to move to this side,
We cannot see.
or we can sit down there,
Okay.
so you can read the subtitles. And I don't know if the lights can be turned a little bit down. And with that, we will be done. But let me just tell you that at 1, the Ukrainian embassy is inviting us all to the Spinelli building at the 0 level, the exhibition space, where there's a photo exhibition that's opening called Cocoon of Life, where you will see the extraordinary work of some NGOs who are bringing people harmed, injured by the war, and treated in Belgium and in Western Europe. So thank you very much. And if you can bear with us for a little bit more than 10 minutes, we'll be very grateful, and we'll all go down and watch and go to the opening of the exhibition.
Hola, soy Sergio Jaramillo, el excomisionado de paz de Colombia desde Cartagena, Colombia. Esta es una campaña para levantar la voz de América Latina en solidaridad con el pueblo de Ucrania. Con unos amigos, con Francisco Samper, Esteban Martucci y otros amigos de México, de Perú, de Argentina, de Uruguay, creamos este espacio para mandarle una voz de aliento a los ucranianos para que sigan resistiendo y para asegurar que América Latina tenga voz propia